This is the Sling 2, a modern light sport aircraft that's becoming very popular with student pilots, but how does it really compare to the Cessna 172 as a trainer? That's why I decided to put it to the test to find out which aircraft is better, but I also wanted to see if I could learn how to fly the Sling 2 in just a single flight. But unfortunately, this flight didn't go as planned.
870 Juliet Alpha, we cannot turn west. Go to executive. I don't know where, you're not going west.
So buckle in because I'm going to show you what makes the Sling 2 special and also share what went wrong during the flight. I'm Hoover and welcome to Hoover's Hangar. First of all, if you've never heard of the Sling 2, it's considered by some to be the most capable light sport aircraft on the market today. It features a modern glass cockpit and a bubble-style canopy that's similar to what you might find on a fighter jet, which is just one of the reasons why I wanted to see how it handled in the air. However, before we take it for a flight, the first thing that we needed to do was brief the mission. By the way, this is Matt, and he's the flight instructor that I'm going to be flying with today, but we'll talk more about him later. For right now, I just want to say that when it comes to learning how to fly, the briefing is probably the most important thing that you can do before you hop in the airplane. That's because this is your opportunity to sit down and talk about the mission and review the objectives. And for today's flight, we were going to depart from North Perry Airport, which sits between Miami and Fort Lauderdale. And our goal was to fly west to the Everglades Air Park, where I'd have a chance to knock out a few patterns and see if I could land the plane. However, the toughest part about doing that is the runway at the Everglades Air Park is only 2,400 feet long and 50 feet wide. So this is going to be the smallest runway that I've ever landed on, which meant that I needed to bring my A game because I definitely didn't want to embarrass myself. That being said, when it comes to the performance numbers for the aircraft, the Sling 2 only needs about 400 feet for the ground roll and takeoff and about 820 feet for landing. Those are much smaller numbers compared to the Cessna 172 that has an average ground roll of about 1,000 feet and needs around 1,600 feet for landing. So right off the bat, the Sling 2 was already winning, but Matt pointed out something very unique about the performance numbers for the Sling 2.
The POH is a little bit funky. At least from what I've seen, most POHs, when you're looking at the performance numbers, they will give you different options based on different temperatures. So Sling doesn't do that. As you'll see, we'll go to section 5, which is always going to be our performance. And this is all they give for takeoff and landing distances. Okay. So of course, we're looking at the feet, not the meters. What Sling does is they use standard temperature for this. So this is based off 15 degrees Celsius. And already here, it's probably closer to 30 degrees Celsius. Mm-hmm. So what I like to do when I'm looking at these numbers is give myself a bunch of margin, maybe add like 40 to 50% to these numbers just to be safe. So you kind of need to adjust based off that.
Okay, I want to pause right here because I think this is very important to understand. If you're going to fly this aircraft, especially on a hot day or maybe somewhere out in Colorado where you're at a higher elevation, you've got to adjust your takeoff and landing performance numbers to be conservative, just like Matt talked about. However, keep in mind that most student pilots aren't typically pushing the limits and trying to max perform the aircraft. And instead, they're probably flying out of airports with 3,000 or 4,000 foot long runways, so it's not a huge concern, but it's still something that you need to pay attention to and understand how temperature and elevation affect your aircraft performance. Regardless, for right now, Matt also took the time during the briefing to explain a few more things that I needed to be aware of when it comes to the Everglades Air Park.
And then, for Everglades Air Park, so like as I mentioned before, smaller airport, right pattern for runway 15. The only thing to keep in mind for this airport is there's no AWOS or ATIS, so there's no weather reporting frequency. So what we'll most likely do is listen to Marco Island right up here. And then what I like to do, obviously, you tell me how you feel about this.
I also want to point out that you probably noticed on the radar image that there was some weather building up around the Everglades Air Park. So that was something that we talked about, and it was pretty typical for a Florida afternoon during the summer. This wasn't going to be a factor for taking off, but we might have to fly further north or south to get around the weather, so we made sure that we had plenty of fuel for the flight. Either way, after about 30 minutes, we were done with the briefing and ready for the flight. And if you're new to this channel, this is the list of aircraft that I hope to fly one day. And even though I have the Sling TSI on the list, Matt watches the channel, so when he reached out and offered me a chance to fly the Sling 2, I couldn't say no.
So we'll start with our pre-flight, and we're going to start in the cockpit here of the Sling 2. As you can see, we have our beautiful avionics bay here, Garmin G3X, GTN 650, and our G5.
All right, I want to point out a few things about this aircraft that you need to know. First of all, instead of a yoke, you have a control stick between your legs, which is something that I'm used to from my days flying the Strike Eagle, and I thought it was pretty cool to see. Next, Matt mentioned that the aircraft has a Garmin G3X touch display, which as far as I'm aware comes standard on all Sling 2 aircraft. So basically you're learning to fly with a modern glass cockpit from day one compared to a Cessna 172 where you might have some modern avionics, but you could also be flying a standard 6-pack of instruments or any combination in between. So overall, I like how the Sling 2 is preparing student pilots for future careers in aviation, and you have consistency across the fleet. The Sling 2 is classified as a light sport aircraft, and that means the max takeoff weight of the aircraft is only 1,320 pounds, and it can only carry 2 people, and it has a useful load of about 470 to 500 pounds. It also has a max speed of 120 knots with a max stall speed of 45 knots, and it comes with a Rotax 912 engine that provides 100 horsepower. Now keep in mind that these numbers are for the factory-built, ready-to-fly version of this aircraft, but the truth is there's also a kit that you can buy where you build it yourself, and that's registered as an experimental, but that gives you about 200 pounds more payload capacity, so that's just something to keep in mind. However, when we compare that to the Cessna 172, the Cessna has a Lycoming IO360 engine that produces about 180 horsepower, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're going a lot faster. That's because the 172 isn't a light sport aircraft, and it can carry up to 4 people and has a max takeoff weight of around 2,500 pounds and a useful load of about 850 pounds. So overall, the Cessna 172 is the winner when it comes to the useful load and the ability to carry more passengers than the Sling 2. Either way, as far as the rest of the pre-flight is concerned, it was pretty much standard and nothing too special about the Sling 2 compared to the Cessna 172 pre-flight.
So how we teach the walk around at Dynasty is to avoid being so heads down in the checklist and to make sure you're actually spending time focusing on what you're looking at. We teach the walk around, and then once we're done doing the walk around, we'll come back to the checklist and in front of the plane, and we'll make sure we didn't miss anything. So that's our chance to double check our work.
Now, I personally like this method of using a flow versus trying to read through each item on the checklist as you're doing it, especially when it comes to the walk around. And I'm sure there are pros and cons to each method, but as long as you're using or referencing a checklist, that's all that matters. And now that we were done with the pre-flight, it was time to go flying.
Cool. All right, so Hoover, I'll give you the key. You can put that in the ignition whenever you have a sec. And it'll be teeth down in there.
All right, let me just say that when it comes to getting in the aircraft, I'm about 6 feet tall and I still have plenty of room. I didn't feel like we were too cramped, and I liked how the open canopy made it feel like we had more room than we actually did. Now you might notice that I didn't have a checklist, and that's because I told Matt that we would use his, and essentially we were going to operate like a crew for this flight, with me being the pilot flying, and he would be the instructor serving as the pilot monitoring. That meant instead of using a flow, he was going to read each step on the checklist and then I'd do it. And I'll be honest, even though I've never seen the inside of a Sling 2 before, everything was very intuitive and right where I'd expect it to be in terms of the switches that I had to move to get the aircraft ready to start. In fact, it took less than 60 seconds from the time I sat down until the time we were ready to start the engine, but pay attention to what happened next because that's when we made our first mistake.
If you want to give us a good clear prop.
Clear prop! In case you missed it, as soon as I started the engine, the aircraft started rolling forward and Matt had to apply the brakes. Now here's where you need to know that the Sling 2 doesn't have toe brakes on the rudder pedals like most aircraft. Instead, it has a handbrake that is located between the 2 seats, and what you're supposed to do is set the parking brake before you start the engine, but here's what happened. I wasn't thinking about the brakes too much because I knew they weren't on the rudder pedals, and I just assumed that the brakes were set. And when we did the pre-flight, the parking brake was set. However, the aircraft was located too close to the building. So after the pre-flight, we had to pull it forward some, and we didn't set the parking brake after we did that. Now I realize that's a minor thing, but if someone had been walking in front of the aircraft, then I'm sure it would have startled them, and that's why the checklist usage is so important, because when you do something that gets you out of your typical rhythm, like pulling the airplane forward before you start the engine, the checklist helps you catch anything that you missed. And the next to last item on the before engine start checklist says parking brake on. Either way, we debrief what happened on the spot and learned a good lesson for next time. Matt spent a few minutes walking me through some of the avionics, and here's what you need to know. The aircraft has a Garmin G3X, which is basically a 10-inch touchscreen display for your primary flight instruments, and it also has a Garmin G5 for your backup instruments. The Sling 2 also comes standard with a Garmin 205 VHF radio as well as a transponder, and the aircraft that we were flying was equipped with an autopilot as well, but that's an optional feature. Overall, I thought the setup was very clean and well designed, and we even had a glove box on the right side, but you could always get a second Garmin G3X display if you wanted one on that side. As we continued our before taxi checklist, we got the latest weather information for the airfield, and then it was time to taxi.
And before taxi is complete, so you are good to go. So when we're releasing the brakes, because this is our handbrake right here, you're going to hold the handbrake and then release the parking brake. That way you don't start moving right away like we did when we started the engine. Okay. And then you can start moving, like feel around, get a feel for it, play around with it, do whatever you need to do. Okay. And you can go, and you'll see the yellow line off to our right there. That's what we'll be going for. And your controls. Your controls. There you go. You can play around with that brake.
Okay.
Takes some getting used to, especially if you're coming from like a 172.
For brake is AS10 Papa Yankee, we're holding like northwest on 2000.
It's definitely a very different thing.
Definitely. So it looks like we have some traffic right off our nose. So if you go past this twin right here, you can pull into the left, and it looks like it got out of our way. Yeah, it takes some getting used to, for sure. You can always use the throttle as well. If you feel like you're really holding that brake, you can just reduce some power, let the plane roll.
All right, just to be clear, the reason we weren't talking to the ground controller yet is because the ramp where we were parked isn't part of the controlled movement area. And as we got to the end of the ramp, that's when we needed to call ground, and that's when I made my second mistake.
Always wanted to hear a Hoover radio call.
Okay. Let's say ground. Taxi.
Oh, we go westbound.
To the ramp. Cross
Echo.
Runway 28 left at Delta.
And it's North Perry ground.
North Perry ground.
Okay. North Perry ground, November 870 Juliet Alpha, taxi with Echo.
And 0 Juliet Alpha is at Bobby's.
Number 870 Juliet Alpha ground, runway 28 right, taxi via Delta Papa, cross runway 19 left on Papa.
Taxi 28 right via Delta Papa, cross 16 left on Delta.
Say that again?
That was taxi to 28 right via Delta Papa, cross 19 left on Papa, 0 Juliet Alpha.
19.
19.
Got the numbers upside down.
Okay, I always like to do a quick taxi brief before we get moving, make sure we're both on the same page. So we're going to 2A right, instructions were Delta Papa, so we'll make a right onto Delta, and then we'll make a left onto Papa.
Gotcha.
And we are clear to cross 19 left at Papa, and that'll take us all the way down. Your controls.
The reason why I wanted to show you that is because there's no such thing as the perfect flight. Every time a pilot flies, there's always something that's going to go wrong, or you're going to make a mistake somewhere. That's why the debrief is so important. Take the time to talk about what went wrong and why, so that way you don't make the same mistake again. Now in this case, this was an unfamiliar airfield for me, and I should have taken the time to ask Matt about what taxi instructions we could expect to hear, and also I had no idea we were at Bobby's, so that would have been helpful to know. And the thing is, even though I was looking at the airfield diagram in front of me, I still got confused and messed it up, but judging by Matt's laugh, I think maybe he was just setting me up. Either way, we debriefed the mistake during the rest of the taxi, and in case you missed it, I also want to point out how after we got the taxi instructions, Matt took the time to do a taxi briefing, which is a great way to operate as a crew, because you and the other pilot are both verifying that you heard the same instructions, and you're also verifying the route you're going to take. By the way, in case you're wondering, it didn't take long to get used to using the handbrake to control our speed since the aircraft doesn't have toe brakes. We finished taxiing down to the end of the runway and got in line with several other aircraft waiting to take off, and that's when we did our run-up checks to make sure everything was working the way it's supposed to for the flight.
All right, and now we can go through our run-up. So end to end if possible, not really possible right now. We wouldn't want to turn all the way around. Brakes are set and hold. Controls, if you want to do a box check with our controls, make sure they're free and correct.
Okay, runway 28 left at Echo, left to taxi to sport 14.
Looks good, got aileron up, aileron up, looks good. All right, fuel selector, we'll go to the high tank, so you can tap on those gauges, see how much is in each tank. Looks like they're about the same. Got 11 and 11, so we can keep it on the right. Engine, so we can bring our engine to 3,000 RPM first.
Overall, that entire process, even with Matt reading off the checklist to me, only took about 3 minutes, and then as we moved forward in line, it was time to talk about emergencies on takeoff.
So for our emergency brief, so if we are on the runway during the takeoff roll, if our RPMs are below 4,600, if any of our engine gauges are not green, or if our airspeed does not come alive, we're going to abort the takeoff. It's going to be power idle, max brakes off the runway. We're going back to the ramp. Okay. If we're below 700 feet with any issues, including an engine failure, we're going to pitch for our best glide 72 knots, look for the best place to land, left or right 30 degrees, and declare an emergency. Above 700 feet, we're going to do the same thing, pitch for our best glide 72 knots, look for the best place to land, which is going to be turning around and coming back to the airport, declare an emergency.
Okay.
And safe to say, if we do have any real emergencies on this flight, that I will take the controls if you want to handle the radios.
Yep.
And I'll have the checklist right here.
Now, you might have noticed that Matt briefed 700 feet as our decision point for whether we would try to make it back to the runway, but that's all based on your own comfort level as a pilot and your experience with the aircraft, so you can always be more conservative. It's also worth mentioning that if we tried to turn back to the runway, it's easier than most airports because North Perry has parallel runways. So at 700 feet, you're just making a continuous left turn, and the spacing is already built in for you to land on runway 10 right, going the opposite direction. And I should also point out that the Sling 2 has a glide ratio of 10-1, which is slightly better than a Cessna 172, which is around 9-1.
Okay, runway heading is bugged, and we are good to go.
All right, on takeoff, what's the RPM I'm shooting for?
Above 4,600 for the RPM.
Okay, so is that full throttle essentially?
Full throttle.
Okay, and then what's the rotation speed typically?
55 knots.
Okay.
And then we'll climb out at 72. And then 300 feet, we'll put our flaps up.
Okay. All right.
We are on tower, you are good to go, and you can just let them know westbound departure.
I keep putting pressure on here for the brakes.
It's natural. Yeah, I did the same thing when I first started flying this.
All right.
Number 252, you're number 3, following traffic on a 1 mile, 500 feet, runway 2 right, turn out.
Number 3.
No, Hoover, before we made that call,
Yeah.
I did see lightning over to the west.
I want to interrupt here because just when we thought we were ready to go, Matt saw some lightning off to the east, and you can start to see the clouds building up in front of us, so we talked about it for a minute and decided that we would still take off to the west like we planned, but depending on how things looked, we could always turn around and head back to the airport, or maybe just fly out west over the water away from the weather. I also want to mention that even with that shade above us, it was still getting pretty warm in the cockpit because the Sling 2 doesn't have air conditioning, and we ended up sitting down at the end of the runway for a few more minutes waiting for traffic before we could finally take off.
If we are not able to go west, would you prefer to go eastbound to the shore or just come back?
370, now fly straight out, route 2 right, clear for takeoff.
Straight out, 28 right, clear for takeoff, November 870, Juliet Alpha. Yeah, we can go down the shoreline, that's fine.
Sounds good. Final looks clear. Runway is yours.
All right, so with the brake, just put it all the way forward?
All the way forward. Now you can just use the rudder to get us lined up. I see 28 right.
250, traffic departs prior to your arrival, you're number 1, runway 2 right, clear option.
3 right, clear for the option. Looking at 250.
All right, full throttle.
Full throttle. Gauges are all green. Airspeed is alive. RPM is above 4,600.
1 mile 800 feet.
55.
Number 2, route 2 right, clear option.
keep that nose down just a touch.
Traffic inside, number 2, runway 28 right, clear for the
Yeah, it's really light on the pressure.
Much different than a Cessna.
And then climb at 72, you said?
72 VY.
As you heard me say, it didn't take much backstick pressure to get airborne, and I was almost caught off guard by how fast we took off. But again, that goes back to this being a light sport aircraft, and it's just much lighter on the controls compared to a Cessna 172.
Got parallel traffic in sight.
Yep. Well, you got great visibility with the aircraft, I'll tell you that.
That's the best part about it, I think. Especially at night. The stars, it's great. Now that adds to the heat, that's for sure.
I'm not used to flying with my left hand.
I'm sure.
It's definitely a little different.
Caution, obstacle ahead.
Alright, there's 1,000 feet, climb check, flaps up. Power full.
Power, looking at 297 Holly Lake with
Climb speed 72.
For full traffic.
We're a little fast.
297 operate Roger, iterate right down, runway 28 right,
Just down a bit.
miles west of the airport.
And instruments check. I'll check your gauges for you. Everything looks green. Instruments all look good. Lines up with the G5. Climb check was complete.
Roger.
If you look out in front of us, you can see there's a big rain shower blocking the way that we want to go, and that means we could try to fly north or south and work our way around it, but we can't see what's on the other side of the clouds, and we could be getting into something worse. Now there's a NEXRAD weather capability on the aircraft, but the problem is that data could be a lot older than you realized. In fact, I covered a terrible tragedy on my other YouTube channel where a flight instructor got his student killed because he tried to fly through what he perceived to be a hole in the weather, and he most likely had no idea that the data he was looking at was at least 10 minutes old, and the next thing he knew they were flying in the middle of a thunderstorm. There's definitely a whole lot more to that story, but the point is you always want to be conservative when it comes to the weather.
So the problem is this weather is going to be moving this way.
Yeah.
So there's a good chance it's going to block our entrance back into North Perry. So I think the smartest thing to do would be to probably go to the shoreline.
Okay.
North Perry Tower.
We can go out here. We just don't know how long we'll be stuck out here.
Alpha, about 11
We can fly about 10 degrees to the left.
West.
And we got traffic right off here, off the right.
Stop with information. Foxtrot.
For 171 Hotel Alpha, North Perry Tower, Roger. Continue inbound. Enter a right downwind, runway 28 right. Report 3 miles west of the airport.
So what we can do is we can make a right 180 and follow behind that guy, and then you can call up the tower and just ask for the transition through the airspace west to east.
Report 3 miles west of the airport.
Report 3 miles west of the airport.
I hope your cameras are picking up how big this monster is.
I hope so. We'll see. All right, clear to the right.
Looks good.
And we go down to 1500 for
You
that.
can go down to 1500. I'll put North Perry in so you can get your distance to North Perry.
I really liked how Matt handled the situation, and he essentially presented the option of turning around as the safest thing to do, and I completely agreed. That's why we made a turn to the right and headed back towards the shoreline, but unfortunately our problems weren't over just yet, as you're gonna see later in the flight.
Phoenix 2086. Now, I know a lot of student pilots, they obviously start off in a Cessna 172. What would make someone choose this instead of a Cessna 172?
I think a big seller from what I see is the technology in the plane. I think a lot of student pilots right now that have the airline ambitions are really attracted to having a glass cockpit.
Yeah.
Now I did my training in a Piper and a little bit of Cessna. It had a G3X, but I feel like down here in South Florida it's a lot of 6-packs, which is good. I mean, I did a lot of flying on 6-pack too. Really good experience.
Roger, continue normal downwind.
So that's a big thing. Also, it's much cheaper to operate the aircraft because of how little fuel it burns and how little oil it uses. So we're able to keep our prices lower at Dynasty because of that. So even same price for a 50-year-old Cessna or a brand new Sling, most people will choose that Sling.
Moving 2007, fly northeastbound.
Speaking of operating cost, according to the manufacturer's website, the Sling 2 only cost about $56 an hour based on maintenance and fuel burn. But that doesn't include insurance, which, by the way, I would highly recommend Avemco if you're looking to get the best insurance coverage for your situation. Now, the Cessna 172 cost about $100 an hour for fuel and maintenance, and part of the reason why it's more expensive is because the 172 burns about 7 to 9 gallons per hour, depending on the specific model, whereas the Sling 2 only burns about 4 gallons an hour, and that could end up saving you a lot of money over time. But the money that you save isn't going to matter if you're overpaying for your insurance, and that's why I trust Avemco. They're the only direct underwriter of general aviation insurance in the US, which means that you're not dealing with a middleman. You're talking directly to the people that make the decisions. Now, when we compare the two aircraft side by side, if you're a student pilot, you can rent either of them for about $170 to $180 an hour. However, if you buy the Sling 2, your costs to operate it are going to be significantly less than the Cessna 172. But also keep in mind that when it comes to your budget, Avemco doesn't just look at the type of airplane you fly. They're also going to look at your training. So that means if you complete additional training or if you earn a new rating, Avemco can reward you with discounts. So the work that you're already doing to become a safer pilot can end up saving you money. And honestly, one of the reasons why I like Avemco so much is they care about safety as much as I do, and they've been around to support this channel and my mission since day one. So do me a favor. Even if you already have aviation insurance, scan one of these QR codes on the screen, depending on whether you own an aircraft or you just rent. Talk to Avemco and find out what they can do for you.
And I'll quickly just go through our cruise check. So instruments,
we are in the crosswind turning.
all checks. You can turn our aux off. And lights is required.
Anybody else?
I was going to say, how often do you check the fuel balance?
It'll give you a warning every 30 minutes. It'll tell you when to switch it. I'll only switch it on my own if I see a pretty big difference between what I'm seeing on here.
Okay.
Right downwind to it, right report downwind, Blue Phoenix 251.
And it looks like we got a little bit more weather up here, of course.
So you don't ever really run into like useful load issues with this aircraft, essentially with just the two people, or are people buying this to use it for cross country and trying to put a bunch of
looking to come back?
luggage in the back, or?
Well, that's the thing is that because it can hold relatively so much fuel, you really never need to take full tanks.
Yeah.
Because usually, if you're planning on going for that long, you'll probably have to use the restroom before you run out of fuel.
Yeah.
So that really helps with the useful load as well. Is that you can take maybe 10 to 15 gallons with this plane and have plenty of fuel for a nice little cross country.
Yeah.
So no, it's never really an issue.
Okay, I know I talked a little bit about the useful load of the aircraft earlier, but I think this is one of the great features of this aircraft. You see, the fuel tanks can hold about 39 gallons of fuel. So if you fill those up, you might not be able to take a passenger with you, but your flight time could last about 8 to 9 hours, which is something you probably don't want to do. But like Matt was saying, with 2 adults, you could still carry about 10 to 15 gallons of fuel, and that's going to give you at least 2 to 3 hours of flight time. Regardless, the next thing that we need to talk about and compare is something that gets pilots killed all the time, and that's how the aircraft handles when it comes to a stall, as well as some of the safety features of the aircraft.
So what are the stall characteristics of the aircraft like?
Very light, I would say. So much less aggressive stall than a 172.
Okay.
Which is again great if you wanted to buy this plane to own. And if you want me to show you a stall, if you want to do one, feel free.
Yeah.
We can just climb up a little bit.
Yeah, we'll wait until we get.
Yeah, sounds good. We can wait till we're going away from that.
Clear some of this stuff.
But yeah, very nice stall characteristics, and it's funny.
Is it pretty forgiving?
Very forgiving. Not much of a nose drop really at all. It's funny when I bring students out to do stalls for the first time, they're all worked up from what they think they're going to experience, and they do it, and they're like, that was it. So very forgiving stall, very low stall speeds, 40 knots is the VSO.
Does it give you any sort of muffet stall warning horn? Does it tell you stall stall?
Good question. So you'll get a stall warning message on the G3X.
Okay.
Also, the angle of attack indicator. The angle of attack indicator will show up once you get to a certain angle of attack, and then it'll start going up into the red. And then you'll also get the buffet as well.
Okay.
Usually, the buffet and the nose drop will happen at around the same time.
What other sort of safety features does the aircraft have that are going to help somebody stay out of trouble?
So I think one of the biggest ones is a fantastic autopilot system. Very capable autopilot, especially for a trainer aircraft.
Does that come standard?
It does come standard. A really nice feature with the autopilot is that it has this level button, so no matter what unusual attitude you could put yourself in, hitting that button will bring the wings level.
So it's just like I've seen in like some other aircraft where essentially once you exceed a certain degrees of bank for like 40 seconds or whatever,
Yep.
it would automatically
automatically go back.
take over for
Yep.
it.
And you can turn that feature off if you own this aircraft and you didn't want to have to deal with that, of course. But yeah, it can never hurt to have that on. Yeah, that's probably the biggest thing. That'll really keep you out of trouble. And then the G3X will give you warnings when you're entering certain airspaces.
Yeah.
So if you're somewhere you're not supposed to be. Really nice weather feature as well. So live weather, we can look at cloud tops, winds aloft. Yeah, the next rad's really nice. As we can see, it's not looking too pretty out here, which is pretty typical for this area. Terrain was a big one that I played around with a lot on my trip back from Los Angeles, especially flying through Arizona, New Mexico, where there's a lot of terrain. So that's a great feature as well.
Yeah. I'm just kind of angling out here because that's just a wall of crap in front of us.
Sounds good.
Okay, we're going to do some stalls in a minute as soon as we can find some clear airspace, just so you can see what those look like. But for right now, I just want to clarify that even though Matt said the autopilot was standard, according to the manufacturer's website, it looks like maybe it isn't. I'm not sure. Either way, when we compare this to the Cessna 172, I'd argue that the Sling 2 is the better choice. That's because the Garmin G3X is standard across the fleet, whereas every Cessna you fly could be different. And I'd be willing to bet that most, if not all, Sling 2s have an autopilot, which isn't as common on a Cessna 172. However, in full transparency, there's one really big limitation when it comes to the Sling 2. You see, despite the fact that it has all these avionics, because it falls under the light sport aircraft certification, you're not allowed to operate the aircraft in instrument conditions, even if you have an instrument rating. Keep in mind that the Cessna 172 doesn't have that same limitation, and that means you don't have as much flexibility when it comes to the Sling 2, so that's something that I didn't like, and it definitely made this flight more challenging than I expected.
What's been the scariest moment you've had with a student?
There was one time where we were doing power off stalls, and once we entered the stall, the student, instinctively pulled the stick back as hard as they could. So that was one time where I kind of had to use some force to break that stall. I do feel like the spin training that instructors are required to do really gave me a lot of confidence, knowing that as long as I have enough altitude, then I'm kind of seeing that spins are, I don't want to say they're no big deal, but as long as you know how to recover correctly and promptly, so that gave me a lot of confidence. But that was the one thing that stands out the most.
What did you do your spin training in?
Gamebird, GB1. I did that at Miami Executive Airport. Okay. That was definitely a day I'll never forget, as I'm sure it's designed to be.
At this point, we had been airborne for about 30 minutes and we were going to knock out a few stalls and then head back home. At least that was the plan. However, if you haven't realized it by now, the weather was going to become an issue for us and we were going to have to make a tough decision. And my first time trying to land this plane will be one of the most challenging things that I've done in a long time. We're going to get to that in a minute, but for right now, I want to show you how the aircraft handles.
And we'll do a clearing turn. Some people like to do a left 90 degree, right 90 degree. We teach just a left 360.
Okay.
So at your discretion, you can make a left 360. You can make it as steep as you want. Be a lot of quick steep turn too. And our maneuvering speed is 91 knots.
Yeah, I like that a lot better than a 172.
I guess that's how a fighter pilot does a clearing turn. Okay, you can pull the power back to about 4,700 again.
Okay, I'm going to admit that that was a lot of fun. I don't think Matt was expecting that when he said I could go as steep as I wanted for the turns. Honestly though, the aircraft handled very well. It's very easy to go straight to 60 degrees of bank, and I love how you have such great visibility with the low wing and the bubble canopy, but the real question is, how does it handle on a stall?
All right, so when we teach power off stalls, we simulate a descent first.
Okay.
Make it kind of realistic, so you can just get yourself into descent, and then you can go power idle while you're heading, and you just pitch up for that stall. So angle of attack indicator's increasing. There's our first indication. We'll buff it. And reduce the angle of attack. Full power. Full power. And that is why it's important to stay coordinated in the stall.
Okay.
As you probably noticed, we had a little bit of yaw on that first one, and I initially didn't apply full power, and you can see how it was still fairly easy to recover and very forgiving like Matt talked about, which is good when you think about student pilots learning how to fly in this aircraft.
What'd you think?
I'd like to try that again.
Yeah, go for it.
Alright, so now we're below 85, right?
Yep.
So, and then flaps 1. We'll get a little bit of a descent going here. Flaps 2. Flaps 3. Go idle.
There's our first indication. Yep. There you go. Reduce that angle of attack. Much better. Only lost 100 feet. And you can start bringing the flaps up incrementally.
I did that second one just to show you how it's possible to recover from the stall with very minimal altitude loss if you follow the procedures. This is why I also highly recommend that if you're a pilot, get out there and practice some stalls from time to time, because it's good to refresh your memory on the stall characteristics of your aircraft and get those habit patterns nailed down in case you ever find yourself in an unintentional stall situation.
Okay, so I can see the airport. I would say we should make a decision on, do we want to head back now, or there's a chance if we stay out, we might be out here for a little while.
Then I say let's head back.
Okay, let's go down to 1,500 feet. I'll go direct North Perry on the GPS for you.
As we headed back to the airfield, we got the latest weather information and reviewed the pattern procedures, but here's the thing. We could see the airfield, but we could also see the giant wall of rain that was about to pass over it, and then this happened.
North Perry Tower, November 870 Juliet Alpha. We're about 8 miles VFR to the east, inbound for full stop.
870 Juliet Alpha, we just went IFR.
870 Juliet Alpha, copy.
Well, would you look at that? All right, so what we can do...
Juliet Alpha, you still up?
Affirmative. We'll adjust accordingly.
Looks like Opalaka is IFR as well. Let me give you an update on other, if you need to go somewhere else.
You can start making a right turn.
XC looks pretty open right now.
Okay, copy that. 870 Juliet Alpha, thanks.
No problem.
The reason why the airfield went IFR was because of the rain reducing the visibility to below the VFR minimums. And just to be clear about this entire situation, we've been watching the weather this entire time, and it's always been relatively clear skies to the north along the shoreline, so I was never too concerned about getting trapped by the storm. However, now that we officially can't go back to North Perry, we had 3 options. First, we could try to head south and maybe divert to Miami Executive, but it didn't look too good, and after a short talk with the controller, he verified that there was too much weather if we tried to go that way. The other option was to head north and we could divert to Fort Lauderdale Executive, or we could try to go north a little bit and then turn west and work our way around the storm, because the thing is, we could see blue skies through some of those clouds, and we knew that this was just a small cell of storms passing through. And honestly, this entire process of trying to decide what to do took about 10 to 15 minutes. And at this point, the radios were getting super busy with multiple aircraft all trying to talk to the approach controller to figure out how to get around the weather or divert somewhere. And I'll admit that initially our plan was to fly north and work our way to the west, going around the weather before turning back to the south. But I want you to hear what the controller said.
Approach 0 Juliet Alpha, change of plans. We'll actually just be looking to transition through FXC's airspace and go out to the west.
870 Juliet Alpha, we cannot turn west. You gotta get out of there. You're right, I'm gonna be in the departure thing. So start your descent, go to executive. I don't know where, you're not going west.
2 executive, 0 Juliet Alpha, start the descent.
Now, go to executive. Tower 10.9, good day.
20.9, see ya.
Okay, pay attention here because what the controller is doing is trying to keep us safe. He can see the weather radar, and when he heard us say that we were going out to the west, he doesn't realize that our plan is to fly to the north and work all the way around the weather. And honestly, I think he was also just trying to get us on the ground because he's got too many aircraft to deal with right now. Either way, Matt and I talked a little bit about the plan and the possibility of just flying further to the north and talking to a different controller, and then we could turn to the west, but I want you to listen to our discussion.
I mean, I'm looking at this right
here.
Yeah,
I'm looking at that same thing.
As an option. You know?
Number 7175 November is fighting 090.
09075 November.
Oh, what do you think? You want to just go back?
To FXC?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm okay to take a look out there, and we could always come right back if it's not looking good. But it can never hurt to just get on the ground.
Yeah, let's just get on the ground.
Sounds good.
Let's switch back to
175 November fighting 1260, we're ready in sequence.
As you can see from the weather radar, it looked like there was a possibility of flying between some of the rain showers, and because it didn't look as bad as what the radar data was showing, and since the radar data isn't real time, we were also looking outside and correlating what we were seeing to make our decision. The reason why I'm bringing all of this up is because I think this is a classic example of continuation bias. We had a plan to go north and turn west to get around the weather. And even though the controller was telling us not to go to the west, we were still considering our original plan. However, in the back of my mind, I wasn't feeling too comfortable about it because I knew that whatever we thought was a hole in the weather, well, that could close up before we got there. And even though we both have instrument ratings to fly in the weather, the aircraft isn't legal to do so. That's why we made the safe decision to just get on the ground and wait things out. The only problem was we were already over the airfield where we needed to land, and we were high, and I had less than 4 minutes to figure out how to land this airplane for the very first time.
Executive Tower 870 Juliet Alpha, change of plans. Actually going to be looking for a full stop. Just let us know what you need.
870 Juliet Alpha, Exec Tower, say again?
We're going to be looking for a full stop at Executive. Change of plans. Sorry about that, 0 Juliet Alpha.
870 Juliet Alpha, no worries, just continue northbound. I'll call your turn to the field.
Northbound, 0 Juliet Alpha.
Yeah, I mean, like on the radar, it looks fine. It looks doable.
It can build very quick.
I just say trying to, there's no reason to try to push it.
Yeah, I agree. I'll get our descent checklist done while we're up here.
Still 4 miles in diameter.
Latest we have, altimeter is set, box fuel pump is on, fuel selector will go to the right tank.
Of our 4 Mike Echo to left at Bravo 2 in contact ground.
Lights is required. All seatbelts checked.
Number 870 Juliet Alpha, turn right and fly eastbound for the right downwind runway 27, descend to pattern altitude of 1,000 as soon as able.
Down to pattern altitude as soon as able, right turn eastbound to join a right downwind 270 Juliet Alpha. Alright, let's go down to 1,000.
996 Whiskey, traffic landing the parallel will hold short of your runway. Or correct, traffic landing across the runway will hold short of your runway. Runway 27,
This will be right downwind for
at
27.
32.
27 clear to land, 996 Whiskey, roger traffic.
870 Juliet Alpha, you're looking for a Skyhawk just off your right wing on final at 600.
I got it.
Report site.
Inside 0 Juliet Alpha.
0 Juliet Alpha, turn base to follow them. You're number 3 to the field. Runway 27 clear to land. Wind 230 at 26, gust 32.
Number 3, runway 27 clear to land, 0 Juliet Alpha.
Just to show you where we were, this is our ADS-B data, and we were just cleared to land on runway 27, and the winds were 230 at 26, gusting to 32 knots. So that meant we had at least a 16-knot crosswind component. And while this video is playing through, you're going to see how much we were getting bounced around because of the winds, and I also figure this is a good time to give you my final debrief. First, I want to thank Avemco for sponsoring the channel and making content like this possible. If you want to support the channel, I highly recommend reaching out to Avemco to see what they can do for you when it comes to aviation insurance.
And he is past us.
Tower Dutchess 976 Charlie Upward, 10 miles to the north with Echo, full stop.
So you could do, you could go power idle.
6 Charlie Alpha, exec tower, fly due southbound, end of the left
And we can start dumping the flaps once we get below 85.
6 Charlie Alpha.
I think this is probably one of the most difficult parts about transitioning to a sling is the landing, because it really doesn't float much. It kind of drops like a rock, to be honest.
Okay.
So because of that, we'll come in with a little bit of power in the transition.
Yeah.
And then once we're in the transition with a little bit of power, we'll bring that power to idle. You just need to be ready to bring that nose up. Nothing crazy, but she definitely doesn't like to float. And then once we start dumping flaps, this plane really sinks.
Left Alpha, HR Tango.
Overall, though, when it comes to the Sling 2, I think it's a fantastic aircraft with a modern cockpit. It has great visibility and it's very safe to fly. The only downside is the fact that you can't fly it in the weather, and that's something that I'd like to have the flexibility to do when necessary. However, I'd argue that it's a great choice for student pilots or anyone that just wants to do some fun VFR flying at a very affordable price. And even though the Cessna 172 is still a fantastic trainer, I'd probably rather own the Sling 2.
3 Yankee Alpha, if you continue southbound right there for another about 4 miles, then you can make your eastbound turn. You'll be able to avoid the weather.
We're going to continue south, but there is like 50
Oh yeah.
6 Whiskey, exit in November and contact ground.
November over to ground, 6 Whiskey.
Direct Tower, 6 Whiskey Mike, we're currently 5 to the east, would like to go for full stop.
Who's 5 to the east?
5-6 Whiskey Mike, far to the east.
156 Whiskey Mike, exec tower, fly north along the shore for 2 miles and make a straight on runway 27.
That's along the shore and then straight 27, 6 Whiskey Mike.
Oh, this is fun.
Oh yeah. November 78 Tango Alpha, 11 miles northwest of the field with information Echo at 1,000 feet and full stop.
For 78 Tango Alpha, exec tower, man outside my Delta, call me back in 5 minutes please for volume.
I'll call you back in 5 for volume, 8 Tango Alpha.
And 8 cleared us to land, right?
Clear to land. So just keep that power in. You can bring it out a little bit. There you go. Keep that nose coming down. Now you can start bringing the power to idle. And just hold us off nice and gentle on the stick.
From 976 Charlie Alpha, just turn right another 5 degrees, got
Nice
heavy precipitation, hence your left 5 in diameter.
Little right rudder, there we go.
6 Charlie Alpha.
Alright. Make a left here. You start pulling that handbrake.
Just in case you were wondering, after we landed, we found a spot to park on the ramp and we took off about 30 minutes later after the storm passed for the flight back home. This gave me one more chance to land the aircraft, this time without the gusty winds. But the best part about this entire flight though is that I got to hang out with a great pilot and cross another aircraft off my list and call this mission complete. I want to thank Matt for his time and also Dynasty Aviation, the flight school that he works for that made the aircraft available. They've got a top-notch program and I highly recommend giving them a call if you want to fly the Sling 2. And if you like this video, then be sure to check out one of these other ones on the screen, and thanks so much for your support.